I call Paul Achettl.
Have you taken those on the Bible or an affirmation?
An affirmation.
Affirmation. Would you repeat after me, please? I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly and truly
declare and affirm
that
the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Take a seat, please. Yes, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Your Honour. Will you tell the Royal Commission your full name?
My name is Paul Francis Achettl.
And Mr Achettl, you've provided a statement for the Royal Commission?
I have.
Have you got a copy of that with you?
I think so.
We can give you one if you don't. Perhaps we might just hand you one.
Oh, here it is. I'll still take this.
And you see that dated the 30th of April 2015?
Yes.
And you recognise your signature at the bottom of each page?
Yes. Yes, I do.
And the contents of that statement are true and correct?
Yes.
I invite you to
It'll
read
be
that
Exhibit
statement.
28.9.
Would you like to read your
Oh,
statement?
yes, I can read it.
If you need me to step
Take
in,
over. I will, thank you.
happy to do that.
This statement made by me accurately sets out the evidence I am prepared to give to the Royal Commission into the responses to child sexual abuse. The statement is true and correct to the best of my knowledge and belief. Where direct speech is referred to in this statement is provided in words or words to the effect of those were used to the best of my recollection. My full name is Paul Francis Achettl. I was born in 1957. I am currently 57. I was born in Ballarat and came from a leading Catholic family in the town. My mother is an incredibly devout Catholic, as was her mother. Up until my final year of my primary school, my life in Ballarat had been amazing. The Catholic Church community in Ballarat was incredible. Every Sunday, hundreds of people would get together after Mass. Parish life and the parish picnics were amazing times. I was also an altar boy serving Mass twice a week at St. Alipius Parish Church. I found it enlightening and everything about my life was good then. It felt holistic and complete. The church was part of our life throughout the whole year and my parents were dedicated to that. I was the eldest boy in my family of 4 and I was being prepared to become a priest. My mother would tell me about the custom of the eldest boy in a family entering the priesthood. I attended St. Alipius Primary School in Ballarat from kindergarten right through to 6. My grade 5 teacher, my grade 5 teacher was a Christian brother, Alan Noyes. Towards the end of that school year, Brother Noyes took me and other boys to Sovereign Hill. When we got there, he sat us down and talked to us about queens. I didn't know what he was talking about. He told us to stick together and be aware of how queens behaved. I remember the other boys laughed at me later and they said that I didn't know what he meant. Looking back now, I know it was a warning. Christian brothers at St. Alipius seemed to get more and more violent as time went on. In 1969, when I was 11, I started grade 6. The teacher was Brother Best, or Bestie. He was also the principal. He was authoritarian, but everybody liked him because he seemed to be one of the first brothers trying to improve outcomes for children. He'd helped the school in a big competition in singing. My father adored him. He was always at our place. He used to come to our house and borrow the family car on weekends. First time I was abused by Best, I was only 11. I remembered that I was in the principal's office at the school with another boy, and we were both naked. Best hit me till I cried. He held me quite tightly. That's when he changed from being violent to being tender. That was when he molested me. I know the name of the other boy who was with me at the time, but he's not ready. After our first bashing and cuddling by Bestie, the other boy and I talked. He said that he knew what to do, that we shouldn't cry. And if we don't cry, he won't get to cuddle us. However, the second time I couldn't take it. Again, it was in the principal's office, and I cried. His pattern was to be violent until he cried, and then he would comfort us, and the sex abuse would commence. It became a pattern of isolation, violence, and then the sex mixed with tenderness. Whenever I went into this disengaged mode, he taught me that. Father Ridsdale was another figure from the church. He used to come to our house a lot. Like Best, Ridsdale was one of the priests. Like Brother Best, he used to come to our house a lot. Ridsdale was one of the son of Alepius. He lived in the presbytery on the other side of the church from the school. Both Ridsdale and Best used to enter our house through the back door. My bedroom was at the back of the house, and often Ridsdale or Best would be with me in the bedroom before my parents even knew they'd arrived. I was never abused by Ridsdale. He just sat and talked. Although I did go to places in the car with him, such as to the beach and other places, I was never alone with him. The other boys in the car told me not to get out. I was confused as to why they'd say that, but I did heed their warning. I stopped going away with Ridsdale because it meant staying in the car, which made the trip on the summer's day quite awful. The fact that other children knew what was going on with Ridsdale and were warning me about getting out of the car seemed to illustrate they had a high level of awareness in relation to the risk. We were adamant we would never get out of the car and go into a house. When I was 16, I was chosen to go to a national altar boys convention in Sydney with 30 other boys from St. Alepius. Ridsdale was going to take us. The week we were to leave, Ridsdale left the parish suddenly. I wasn't told where he'd gone, and Best took his place. I went to Sydney with Brother Best and the other boys. We stayed on campus somewhere. I was on edge because Bestie had come on board so late, so suddenly. The other boys and I did awful things while we were there then. We broke into places, vandalised. The time I was abused in 69 by Best, I didn't tell anybody. The first time I told anyone was when I was 20. I lived in Perth with the other victim. Who was with me the first time I was abused by Best. At that time, things were happening to us and our lives were falling apart. We drank a lot. We lived carefree and careless lifestyle. I remember saying, "Why is this happening to us? Do you think it's got something to do with Bestie?" I recall that he acted badly. He reacted badly and said, "What are you talking about? Forget it." He was quite quite sharp and decided not to bring it up again. I decided. The first person I disclosed abuse to was my sister in 83, and at the time I was working with vulnerable children. I had been dealing with 2 homeless boys. The smell of sweat and deodorant they used triggered a physical response in me. My palms started sweating and I didn't feel like I was coping. I realised now that it reminded me of Best. The incident led me to seek advice, and I spoke to the supervising psychologist at work. In following appointments, I identified that I'd rarely ever spoken about the abuse and it was impacting on my life. I remember Best visiting our family in the 80s, and I was totally thrown by him being in our house. He said things like, "I don't know what the church thinks it's doing. I don't know what education thinks it's doing. We're not doing the right thing by our kids." I can't remember the specific issue he was complaining about, but he was very negative and seemed to be resisting changes that were coming. I can remember feeling sick as I had to keep trying to bury this. I couldn't cope and remember my parents being very confused by my behaviour. My sister told Bess to leave our house, as I already told her what he'd done. And up to the rest of my family, my parents were heartbroken. It was in fact just before my father died, so it was bad timing. There was a lot on our plates at the time. I can't remember planning to tell my family, it just came out. I then told friends in my social network, and not many of them reacted well. I have not reported my abuse to the police. I thought till today I was one of the oldest to be sexually abused at St. Alypius. Because of the number of suicides by kids from St. Alypius, I felt there were so many other people who were so grossly harmed that my abuse was not as serious as what. I felt guilty and ashamed that I was part of what turned into a monstrous habit for these men. I began to resent any form of authority, and at the time I did not trust police. This was compounded by the bad reaction of my friends when I disclosed to them. Brother Best has been before the courts a few times now, and the church seems to have paid a lot of money to support him. He has shown no remorse, and there has been no apology. He refuses to say sorry or show any signs that he feels he's done something wrong. The court cases are painful and it angers victims and families. They can't move on. After the abuse at St. Alypius, I went to secondary school at St. Pat's. I was a top student at primary school, whereas at St. Pat's I just lost it. I was in trouble. I got expelled in my final year and got taken back as a full-time boarder. Then in the summer of 75, after I finished school, I was in jail just after my 18th birthday. My life was miserable after that. There's a little litany of failed relationships in my life, and I was a mess. I had such a wonderful, loving family and a great childhood until Best. One of the turning points in my life was seeing the front page of our local newspaper, the Ballarat Courier, a few years ago. The front page simply had 40 crosses on it, each representing the suicides in the community thought to be related to the abuse by Best and Ridsdale. These suicides were all of people who were my age or up to 5 years younger. I felt like the community was unable to reach out to these families who had suffered so much. I also felt my network of friends were not supportive. I felt alone and no one sympathised or empathised with me. They'd say things like, "You're okay, there's nothing wrong, get over it." It didn't pay to bring anything up again. Still to this day, I don't talk about it. I'm currently getting counselling from a psychiatrist who is an expert in sexual abuse. I have a hatred for authority and men who dress up in the name of the clergy. Makes me feel funny to be asked to go into the office. I no longer have any contact with the Catholic Church. I only go there for funerals. I know that my 86-year-old mother is heartbroken about the abuse. There is a sense of betrayal of the community that we're giving them so openly and wholly to these people and to the church. Despite everything, my mother, who is disheartened and disappointed, still goes to church. The current parish priest is Father McInerney. Mum tells me that sometimes at church on Sundays he tries to talk about the issues that have been picked up on the media, but he breaks down because he doesn't know what to say. He says he feels ashamed and his church numbers are dwindling and churches are closing in the countryside around us. People are staying away and he seems heartbroken. There's a history of Huntington's disease in my family and 3 members have committed suicide because of it. I understand the impact of suicide and I know that it's not easy to commit. A lot of people see it as a weakness, but it takes a hell of a lot of strength to take your own life. I believe people can be in such pain and they feel that that pain they are carrying may hurt the people they love. I feel there has been no help for victims of Ridgedale and Best who have committed suicide. It breaks my heart that there are people left out there angry, frustrated and lost. I want to make sure that I don't mean getting them back to church, just getting them back to a community where they can come and talk. It is the people who are dead whose families have been forgotten. Why hasn't the church funded an outreach support service for families of victims of abuse? When we violate children, we destroy their ability to operate. And this is a major lifelong struggle. I have not yet approached the Catholic Church to report the abuse or seek assistance. Many people in the Catholic community think victims are just after money. This locks out victims and survivors. The community seems split. The Catholic Church seems remorseless and unapologetic. They've forgotten the offence. They have supported the offenders and they have paid some victims, but often that doesn't help. My main concern is that the Church lacks an ability to respond appropriately and are in denial, which causes further pain. The Church has the resources to develop supports and re-engage these ostracized people and their families. Intimate violation of children creates a ball of sadness inside. This causes them to disengage and withdraw from society. These children are failing. Once a child's sense of belonging and their ability to connect with others is interfered with, they become isolated. There are very few people there to draw them back. There is a long history of the Catholic Church community in Ballarat struggling to establish itself, build schools and educate children. Catholics were always discriminated against and they weren't employed. By the 50s and 60s, the Catholic community was happy, healthy and thriving. These men, these priests and brothers came in and ripped us apart in a... Shame is rife. It's like an unseen cancer in this town. There is no collective memory or place to mark the abuse and the horror of suicides. There is nothing that brings us together to talk about this. It is like an unseen carnage.
Does anyone else have any questions? No, thank you, Mr. Achettl, for your evidence. Thank you. You're now excused.